Here's a question almost nobody asks out loud. How do you carve a stone room so perfectly that a razor blade won't fit between the blocks, using nothing but copper chisels 4,500 years ago? One man has spent 30 years standing in front of the Great Pyramid asking exactly that. His name is Graham Hancock, and what is found has put him at war with almost the entire field of Egyptology. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you may never look at those stones the same way again. Let's start with who this man actually is, because it matters. Graham Hancock isn't a professor. He doesn't hold a degree in archaeology, and he'll tell you that himself openly in nearly every interview he gives. What he was originally was a journalist, a foreign correspondent who spent years writing for respected outlets before he ever set foot near a pyramid. That background shaped how he works. Journalists are trained to distrust neat, tidy stories. They are trained to ask who benefits and what's being left out. In the early 1990s, Hancock turned that instinct away from politics and business and pointed at ancient history instead. He hasn't stopped since. Over the following 3 decades, he built a body of work, most famously his book Fingerprints of the Gods, published in 1995, arguing that our picture of prehistory is missing an entire chapter. He has traveled to Egypt, Indonesia, Japan, Central America, chasing a pattern he believes connects ancient sites across the globe. The idea that a sophisticated civilization existed before the last ice age ended was largely wiped out by catastrophic flooding around 12,000 years ago, and that fragments of its knowledge survived in the myths and monuments of the cultures that came after. It's a bold claim, and it's not one that mainstream archaeology accepts. Not even close. Egyptologists and archaeologists have pushed back on Hancock hard, and it's worth being honest about that up front. The core criticism is that he works backward, that he starts with a conclusion he wants and goes looking for evidence that fits it, while skipping past the evidence that doesn't. Professional archaeologists point out that we have quarries, work of villages, ramps, tools, and even ancient administrative documents tied directly to pyramid construction in the 4th dynasty. We'll get to those. Hancock's defenders see it differently. They see a man asking uncomfortable questions that credentialed experts are too invested in the existing story to take seriously. Whichever side you land on, his arguments are worth actually hearing in full before you decide. So let's walk through them the way he presents them. Hancock's case starts inside the pyramid itself, in the king's chamber. Picture it. You climb through the narrow, sloping grand gallery, one of the genuine engineering marvels of the structure, and you arrive in a room built from massive slabs of red granite. In the center sits a rectangular box, commonly called a sarcophagus. It's plain. No inscriptions. No painted scenes, no hieroglyphs anywhere in the chamber. And when the room was reopened in the modern era, the box was empty. No mummy, no lid, no jewelry, no grave goods. Hancock leans hard on this. Ancient Egyptians were relentless about decoration and inscription, tomb walls, coffins, temple columns. Virtually every surface in royal burial context carried text meant to guide the dead through the afterlife. So why is the most famous tomb on Earth almost completely silent? It's a genuinely striking observation, and it's fair to raise. Where mainstream Egyptologists differ is on what it means. Their answer is that a pyramid was looted in antiquity, likely during political chaos at the end of the Old Kingdom or later, and that grave robbers, not the absence of burial, explain the empty sarcophagus. Undecorated interior chambers also show up in some other 4th dynasty pyramids, which several scholars take as evidence that elaborate funerary texts simply hadn't become standard practice yet. The famous pyramid texts don't appear inside pyramids until roughly 2 centuries later, under King Unas. Hancock isn't persuaded by that explanation, and that disagreement is really the heart of the debate, not new facts so much as which explanation you find more convincing. From there, Hancock moves to the question of attribution. How do we actually know Khufu built this pyramid at all? And this is where the story gets genuinely dramatic. In 1837, a British explorer named Colonel Richard William Howard Vyse was excavating the pyramid, running low on time and funding. Using gunpowder, his team blasted their way into a series of cramped relieving chambers above the king's chamber, spaces that had been sealed since construction. Inside, painted in red ochre, were quarry marks, the kind of working notes ancient laborers left behind, including crew names and, crucially, a cartouche, a royal name ring, read by scholars as Khufu. That discovery is To this day, the single most direct piece of evidence linking Khufu to the Great Pyramid. Hancock finds that troubling, and is not alone. A handful of independent researchers over the decades have raised the same question. His argument runs like this. The marks were found by a man under enormous pressure to produce a career-making result in a sealed space with no independent witnesses present at the exact moment of discovery, and some researchers have pointed to details in the paint and lettering they consider unusual. It's important to be precise about what Hancock actually claims here. He stops short of directly accusing visor forgery. What he argues is that the circumstances would raise serious red flags in any other context, and that the mark deserve more scrutiny than they've historically received. Mainstream Egyptology has responded to this at length, and it's a fair response to include. Later, independent re-examinations of Vi's original excavation diaries, including analysis published by researchers unaffiliated with Vi's himself, found the marks consistent with authentic Old Kingdom quarry inscriptions, and additional cartouches of Khufu have since turned up elsewhere at Giza. Perhaps the strongest piece of evidence came decades after Hancock first raised these doubts. The discovery in 2013 of the Diary of Mir, a set of papyrus logbooks found at Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast. It's the oldest inscribed papyrus ever found, and it records the day-to-day work of a crew hauling limestone from Chura to Giza during what it explicitly describes as the final years of Khufu's reign, under the supervision of an official named Ankef, Khufu's own half-brother. For most Egyptologists, that discovery closed the door on serious doubt about who built the pyramid and roughly when. Hancock has acknowledged the papyri exist, but maintains they don't fully settle the deeper questions he's raising about the site's history, a position that puts him in a small minority. So let's set the attribution question aside and go to the part of Hancock's argument that he considers his strongest, the physical precision of the structure itself, because you don't need a name in a chamber to measure stone. Start with orientation. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of a few hundredths of a degree, a genuinely remarkable achievement for any era. Hancock argues this level of precision is difficult to reconcile with a workforce using only naked-eye astronomical observation and basic tools. Here again, mainstream researchers have proposed workable methods, most notably using simultaneous observations of a star's rising and setting position to bisect true north, a technique that doesn't require a compass and that ancient Egyptian astronomers are known to have used for temple alignments elsewhere. Whether that fully accounts for the pyramid's exceptional accuracy is still debated even among specialists, which is part of why Hancock's question keeps resurfacing. Then there's the base. The pyramid's footprint, spread across roughly 13 acres, is leveled to within a small fraction of an inch across its entire span, an extraordinary feat on natural bedrock. And there's a famous claim about the joints between blocks, some weighing several tons apiece, fitted so tightly that a blade can't slip between them. Hancock treats this as physical proof that something doesn't add up in the traditional timeline. Engineers and archaeologists who study the construction methods point to evidence of copper saws combined with abrasive sand, water leveling techniques using channels dug into the bedrock, and, crucially, the Wadi al-Jarf papyri again, which describe exactly this kind of large-scale coordinated stone-hauling operation in practical, almost mundane administrative detail. It reads less like a mystery and more like a bureaucratic logistics report, which some find to be the most convincing evidence of all precisely because it's so unglamorous. Hancock's final major point is about timeline and pace. Divide the estimated number of blocks in the pyramid by the roughly 20 years Khufu's reign allows for construction, and you land on a construction rate of one large block every few minutes, day after day, for 2 decades. He argues that pace is implausible without some method we don't fully understand. Most Egyptologists respond that this calculation oversimplifies the actual work. Construction likely used multiple work crews operating simultaneously at different points in the structure, and the workforce, estimated at somewhere between 10 and 40,000 people depending on the season, included specialized teams for quarrying, hauling, and setting stone in parallel rather than one continuous single-file operation. It's a real logistical challenge either way. Nobody disputes that this was one of the most demanding engineering projects in human history. But difficult and impossible are different claims, and that's really where the two camps split. There's also the ramp question, which Hancock raises as a genuine unsolved puzzle. No definitive full-scale ramp system has been found intact at Giza, and a simple straight ramp long enough to reach the pyramid's height at a workable slope would have required an enormous amount of additional material. This is actually one of the more open questions in Egyptology itself. Researchers have proposed spiral ramps built up around the exterior, internal spiral ramps within the structure, and combinations of the two, and remnants of construction ramps have been found at other sites, including evidence at Giza itself uncovered by archaeologist Mark Lehner's team. The debate isn't ramp or no explanation so much as which ramp design, and it remains genuinely unresolved in the technical literature, which is one of the few places where Hancock's skepticism and mainstream archaeology actually overlap. So where does that leave us? Hancock's case rests on a real and legitimate observation. The Great Pyramid represents an extraordinary leap in precision compared to earlier and even some later pyramids, and the exact methods used remain incompletely understood in certain details, even today. That's not a fringe claim. Plenty of mainstream Egyptologists and engineers openly say the same thing about specific unresolved logistics. Where Hancock diverges sharply from the field is in concluding that this gap in our knowledge points toward a lost, older civilization or an inherited monument rather than the work of Khufu's own engineers building on generations of prior pyramid-building experience at sites like Meidum, Dasha, and Saqqara. The evidence of continuous, if imperfect, development across those earlier pyramids is well documented, and it's part of why most archaeologists see the Great Pyramid as a culmination of a learning curve rather than a structure with no precedent. What's true is this: ancient engineering still holds real mysteries. Some of Hancock's individual observations about precision and scale are worth taking seriously as engineering questions, and the field of Egyptology continues to actively debate construction methods to this day. What's also true is that his broader conclusions, that Khufu didn't build the pyramid, that its origins trace to a vanished prehistoric civilization, are rejected by the overwhelming majority of archaeologists and Egyptologists who study this period based on physical, textual, and administrative evidence that has only grown stronger in the past decade, particularly with the Wadi al-Jaf discovery. So here's the real question we're sitting with, and it's not was Hancock lying or was he right all along? It's this: how much genuine uncertainty is there in ancient engineering, and how much of what feels like mystery is actually just a space between what we've proven and what we simply haven't gotten around to explaining in a satisfying way yet? Graham Hancock has built a career in that gap. Whether you think his shining a light into it or exploiting it is, honestly, up to you. What do you think? Does the precision of the Great Pyramid point to something we haven't figured out yet? Or is this a case of an old mystery that's already been solved and just hasn't caught up with public imagination? Let me know in the comments.